You're checking out One Dish, One Mic on the iHeart Radio Network or 610 or somewhere. You can listen to this somewhere. Or maybe you're watching us on YouTube right now. It's a cold, snowy day where you're sitting. Sean Vanderklis, how have you been, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I talked a little bit about the budget last week, and I don't know if you saw the work, but I had a couple journalists. I had Patty Sontag on and the
Yeah.
Investigative Journalism Foundation. I still think listeners need to be heading over to that website and checking out the phenomenal work that they're doing. Of course, APTN News, CBC Indigenous, and all the other pundits have had their say. But I wanted to talk to you specifically about this budget, and I'll start with, I won't bury the lead here. What the budget is doing that I think is very sneaky, from an accounting standpoint, is they're not gutting Friendship Center core funding. What they've been doing is Friendship Center core funding has been renewed on these like terms, like 3 years and 5 years and 10 years. It used to be that Friendship Centers were core funded as what they would have an evergreen agreement, I believe is what they called it. Harper pulled the evergreen agreement. Everybody thought that Trudeau was going to put the Evergreen Agreement back. Trudeau's people always sort of said like, oh yeah, we're getting to it. Now there's been a total regime change. Everything is sort of reactionary to Donald Trump and the investors and the bankers or whatever motivates this particular government to make the decisions that they're making. But now Friendship Center funding, in particular, the poorly named UPIP, Urban Partnership for Indigenous People, which is the main program that funds the administrative core, the executive directors, the bookkeepers, the things that actually make Friendship Centers move forward outside of programming, in addition to many other programs. It's not being cut. It's being sunsetted. They have said they're not intending to renew this, and there's no money in the budget for this program. To me, that's the kind of sneaky thing that this budget seems to be full of these types of loopholes. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on the importance of the funding to Friendship Centers, the budget at large, just sort of where we're at. I'm so curious about your thoughts, Sean.
Well, I mean, it's I guess it's classic liberalism at its finest. There's no
A
flashy
large L liberalism.
yeah,
Partisan. Yeah.
yeah. There's no flashy announcements that state that they're doing these things. There is nothing but glossy papers. When we talk about reconciliation, I mean, a couple things with the budget. First off, is it makes us all a monolith. And this is the biggest criticism that I've seen throughout any pundit, is that we are still referred to as Indigenous people and we're funded as such. So we get large envelope fundings that is set to fund all Indigenous people, not acknowledging that, again, there's First Nations people, status, non-status, Métis, and Inuit, that exist in very different worlds across very different platforms with very different needs specifically.
Yeah.
On top of that, all that funding that we hear about when we talk about Indigenous people is usually reserved for community-specific programs. So if you're a First Nations person, it's designed for First Nations funding or on-reserve funding. The government refuses and has historically refused to acknowledge that the vast majority of First Nations people and Indigenous people as a whole live in urban environments. And I honestly think it's just that they just simply don't know. And like, it has to be that they're just clueless on where we reside, because what we're seeing with UPIP, UPIP, we're peeing, they're not peeing, is that they just don't care. They don't care, and they're removing these core funded programs. Friendship Centers are a lifeline for Indigenous people who live in urban environments, and for the core funding to be gone. When we talk about core funding, this is like the administrative budget of the administrative branches of the organization. So if we think about community care as an example, community care's executive director, their finance, their HR all gets paid out of what would be considered core funding, or like their general office's expenses, right? That's the same thing for Friendship Centers, with the exception of there's no specific job titles that are associated with this. We're given $150,000 a year. What was it when you were executive director, Karl? It's like
the core funding is enough for a couple like mid-level administrative positions for each Friendship Center. So a drop in the bucket, basically.
Yeah,
a drop in the bucket. Relative to speaking, there's like just over 100 Friendship Centers. It always chafed me that there were 140 fully funded, federally funded residential schools, and at its peak, they only funded 120 Friendship Centers. So when the goal was to take away the kids, you got money for 140 different locations. And then when you have these organizations that directly counteract that in urban settings where, as you said, in urban people live, that, you can only fund like 100 to 120 of them. It's a ridiculous program to cut.
It's like subpar funding too. Like that's the issue. Is like our executive directors. I mean, I'm probably sharing too much, but there's probably a handful of executive directors across the province of Ontario who make over $100,000 a year. Probably a handful. So if you were to equate that to our urban partners, our stakeholders that live in urban settings, like again, community care, out of the cold, so on and so forth, all these not-for-profits that are doing fantastic work, none of them, I can guarantee you, none of them are making under $100,000. Our people are underfunded, underpaid, and underappreciated, and now apparently aren't going to have a job after I can't remember when it's set to sunset, but whenever that time frame comes to be.
So the Minister of Indigenous Services, Mandy Galmasti, she commented on this directly, and again, credit to APTN and their reporting for highlighting this. So they asked her directly, and so you've got elementary and secondary education for First Nations, you've got emergency response programs, you've got the Urban Programming for Indigenous Peoples Program, the UPIP, and you've got a non-insured health benefit line, as well as funds that have been used to enhance education. And so again, what they're doing is they're just not renewing those programs. So they're letting the budget line zero out at the end of the year. There doesn't appear to be any kind of set aside that's going to replace these programs, though. And so it's the same sort of thing as Paul Martin's like 2% funding cap on education. Like he said, well, we're going to grow the amount every year, and we're going to commit to what we have. And so we're not cutting education per se. But then he knew that with changes to the Indian Act and the citizen roles of different First Nations, that those numbers were going to balloon out of control. He also would have known at the time that our youth birth rates are very high. And so we have a lot of young people that want to get into education. And for me, the education one, that's the one that hits the hardest, because I think that's the true investment, I think, it's a myth to say that education is the great equalizer. So don't get me wrong. Even though I work for an educational institution by day, like I'm very aware of the colonial harm that an educational institution can do. But still, our people, should they so choose to go to school, according to the treaty agreements, should have the right to go to school. Our people, should they choose to access enhanced healthcare benefits because of the medicine chest, should be able to do it. And they just have not been able to at any point in our lives. We've seen that number decline and decline and decline. Or the accounting trick is that the number stays frozen, but our numbers go up and up and up and up and up, and the funding level never matches it. So to me, it's a sneaky thing, because it's the same idea as annuity payments, saying, well, we promised you $4 a year forever for the entire existence of the nation. And it doesn't matter that inflation, like, that works out to like $40,000 per year per person or whatever. It's the same kind of accounting trick that I mean, it's sneaky. But to circle back to the friendship centers, for me, like, it is such a hard fought battle. And this is something that the thing that differentiates our show from any other program that you could listen to, any other podcast, is that you and I are friendship center babies. We're not where we are if not for friendship centers. And I just think it sends a certain kind of message here. And I don't know what to make of it. Is there a silver lining, or is it just that Carney don't care about us?
I mean, I honestly think it's just that Carney doesn't care. Again, it's all. What is it? The term I saw earlier was all glossy pages, but no substance when it comes to this. Like, the funding that does exist, the funding that was announced, is not new funding. It's recycled funding that is being followed through on promises of years before. There's nothing new that's coming to Indigenous people. We're still being caught up in the water treatment facilities. They've announced money that's going into water, clean water, but that's not new money. That's not in accordance with Western society. Nor is it at a level that effectively reaches the mandates that are set out in the calls to action for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Right? We're still chronically being underfunded. And again, like, do we talk about the minister being Indigenous?
Yeah.
Like, at what point does this play an option, right? Like, this is when we say ACAB, all cops are bastards. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but this same standard applies to people who subscribe to these political governments, these political machines that you sign up and you run, and congratulations. And I'm of the opinion that individuals have the capacity to change institutions from the inside, but not in this role, right? This is why I tip my hat to Saul Momokwa every single time, because he refuses to take on these roles, because he knows that he's essentially charged with the policing or the demise of Indigenous people, right? And that's exactly what's happening here. Is is that these institutions, political institutions are overseeing the demise of, again, what could be the friendship centers. Because the federal government, so to bring this back to friendship centers specifically, the federal government's contributions to the friendship center movement solely for the most part exists with UPIP, the UPIP fund, the UPIP programs. The success of friendship centers are widely attributed to the provincial agencies. So in Ontario, the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers, the success of the Niagara Regional Nature Center is directly correlated to the success of O5C. So what this is doing is essentially what the federal government has historically done, and it's downgraded its responsibility to a provincial level. So once we get rid of core funding for the friendship centers, there goes the national office. The National Association of Friendship Centers is going to cease to exist. Which, I mean, they're also going through a leadership change right now. Shout out to Jocelyn Formsville, who's now taken on a lead role with Inspire. I believe she's a new CEO of Inspire. I can't remember. I don't know if they use CEO or executive director or whatever the case may be. Jocelyn Formsville is now the head of the ship at Inspire, which is located in Six Nations. Also a great organization that focuses on post-secondary funding. But with this leadership change happening now, does the NAFC have the capacity to effectively advocate for this? Do they have the capacity to call out the federal government? I don't know that they do, and I don't know that that's necessarily a reflection of them. But where is the federal government in all of this? Like, other than announcing that this is going to sunset. I've sat on a national board. I was there when we were talking about a transition of power from the PHAC, which would have been the Ministry of Health back then. So we used to be core funded through the Ministry of Health, and we were talking about, we had an evergreen funding agreement with the ministry, like you mentioned, not PIAC. It's bothering me that I can't remember.
Let's hit a pause anyways for radio listeners. We're gonna take a break right now. For YouTube listeners, hang tight. We're gonna pretend like there's a radio break and then come right back. So all right, thanks for hanging tight. We just had a chance to hear from our sponsors, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the program all the way through, or maybe you're watching this clipped up on Facebook. So yeah, you're getting into the nuts and bolts, and I want to do that, and I think that's something special that we can bring to this analysis. And I'm also looking at this press release from OFIFC. And kudos to them for making it very clear for the general public. But before we get into that, I want to touch on that issue. I have a policy, as you know, that I try not to use this show as a place where I'm going to criticize other Indigenous people. It puts me in one hell of a position when Mandy Galbasti is the minister, though, for Indigenous Services, because she's, like, for lack of a better term, she's the cop. Like, she's the person that has, I believe, the conflict of interest of trying to meet this austerity agenda. Again, I have some broad thoughts on how much this budget serves bankers. To be perfectly honest, I have some broad thoughts on how I actually think that what happened with the interest rate was actually effective, and that unfortunately, like, yes, real estate investors have hurt, and I feel bad for the condo market and for all of the construction jobs that are dependent upon that. I'm aware of the economic impacts of that, but at the end of the day, the fact that rents are going down all across Canada is a sign that the policy was actually working as it was. People that are invested in business and in making budgets and in government and things like that, they can't afford to say what I'm going to say. It's a very good thing for regular people, like the people that are probably listening to this radio program, that rents are coming down. Anybody who's out there, and I see some of these articles on like CBC and the CTV, and they're like, oh my God, the rents are coming down. What are those poor investors going to do? It's like, I don't know, get a regular job like the rest of us and be able to afford someplace to live.
And this is like the hypocrisy that exists, is that we acknowledge that dealing in the stock market is a gamble.
Yeah.
We do.
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed. Why do we not acknowledge that same process when it comes to owning a house?
Yeah.
I don't understand the disconnect. Like, I mean, if you know when housing becomes an issue, or the housing prices and inflation become an issue, is when your goal is solely money.
Yeah.
Right. When you want to sell that house, when you want to flip it and sell it,
yeah.
or when you want to do whatever the case may be. If this is your long-term house, does value really matter? Like, if you plan to live here for 20 years, why does it matter if your house goes up and down? The value of your house goes up and down. It doesn't, because you're not selling. right? And that's economics 101. Like when you, or that's investing in the stock market 101 is when you look to invest in the stock market, you don't look at a daily basis. You don't check into your account every single day to see the value. You put in your money and you close your eyes and you come back in 20 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something. And the fact that Canada let housing become such a commodity is something that I like. I get it. I really do get it. I respect the fact that people want to have jobs and that we want to see growth, and there aren't, like, I don't hate every aspect of what the Liberals are trying to do in terms of the growth economy and the trades, but I just think that pulling our kids from and saying that we're not going to pay you if you want to go to university. If you want to go to university and if you want to become a doctor, if you want to become a nurse, if you want to become someone that gets their MSW, we may not have money for that. But if you're willing to build a pipeline, we're going to go ahead and do it. Or if you're going to do this new, eventually, don't worry, we'll get those condo prices back up. So then we can build these quick prefab condos that again, a lot of contractors that are out there, and especially the ones that do the work on a community level, are fine, and they're doing good work and they're good people. But a lot of these companies are out there to make a quick buck. But most specifically as Indigenous people, I just don't care that you're not getting the value that you think you're getting out of the land. Just give it back then. If you're not happy with how the land's working, just give it back to us, and we'll make sure that there's like streams and forests and things that will benefit our children and our children's children and so on and so forth. So there is that whole element of this abandoning of environmental policy. There is this whole development agenda. There's this whole thing that again, it just kills me that there's not money for friendship centers. There's not money for healthcare. For not just for Indigenous people, also for non-Indigenous people. Like, we're not going to invest in any of the kind of service professions, but we've got all kinds of money provincially, federally, all over the place for tradespeople, and to build all these things that are gonna help, frankly, bankers and people that want to invest. Carney's not hiding the fact that he says that if the economy works, the private sector will unleash the power of the economy. The private sector will unleash that power. That's trickle-down economics. Like, that is strictly some Reaganomics that are there. And anybody who thinks it's anything different, challenge me on it. Find me on Twitter. Find me on Facebook. Find me on the show. Text the station, 905-688-2582. Find me in real life. Comment on this video if you're watching it on YouTube. I'd love to. I'll look at your numbers. I will read any textbook. You can tell me about your financial strategies. To me, it's a bunch of garbage. But the hardest part is that it's Mandy Galmasti that's delivering it, and it's tough. So my advice for that one, I guess the way that I'll sleep on it is that some good advice that I got from somebody whose opinion I respect is to go hard on the issue, not on the person. It's just harder when that person is an Indigenous woman who by all rights is a good person and has done good community work and has served her people well. And I honestly believe is waking up every morning and is not realizing that she is the face of something nasty that's being done by, again, colonial governments against our people. So I don't know. Where are you with Mandy Galmasti?
I mean, she's the face of our oppressor now. Like, it's really that simple, right? Like, you when I have my nightmares at night about who's going to come in and potentially affect my children's future, it's them. And then now it's her, right? And unfortunately, that's kind of where we are. If you find yourself in any sort of leadership position, I think the onus is on you is to understand all the effects that this is going to have. And she very well should have known that she is going to be the one that's going to take the brunt of all of this. And I don't know that she properly did, or maybe she did, and maybe I'm giving her too much credit, or not enough credit, and maybe she did, and she's okay with that. Maybe she is. I don't know. But what I do know is that again and again and again, the Liberal government have let down our people, have released a budget that for Liberals looks good, but for Indigenous people, for people who work in the social service agency, for people who live on the margins of society, this is not a good budget.
Do you find yourself missing Justin Trudeau?
You know what the worst part is like, I find myself defending Carney, which I want to be clear. I'm not a Liberal. I will fight against Liberals. I hate this.
You only voted for them the one time.
The one time. But like, I find myself defending him because Carney should be a conservative's wet dream. I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's weird. It's weird to see the conservatives and including on talk radio, like not just this station, but many stations that are like against Carney. And I'm like, you're against the like $80 billion for the army isn't enough for you. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna reopen. We're not even gonna reopen the pipeline debate. Like we're just gonna skip the debate and
Yeah.
we're just gonna like find that old paperwork and sign off. It's
It's indigenous led now. Like the LNG pipeline is indigenous led. Like reconciliation's over, guys. We found one group who agrees with us.
I was listening to I think it's the Wellestica Nation, and they had signed on to a development deal that was a relatively small amount of money. Like I think it was something like $280 million over 30 years, which is not a gigantic sum of money by any stretch of the imagination. And they had taken in the first 2 years, I think, a 30% royalty, and they were criticized because they were originally against the project and now they're for the project. But it turns out that what they held over their heads was that they would have to contest to fight for the gas and cigarette and other revenues that they already were drawing on their reserve. So what they did is again, they lumped these things together and they said, do you want to get in on this development project with us? And they said, no, we're not interested in it. And they said, well, also we're looking at this line item over here and we're noticing that you're making a good amount of money off selling gasoline to people. So, maybe we're going to negotiate that. So now how do you feel about this energy price? So I'm making sweeping generalizations. So if anybody from those communities wants to go ahead and contact this show, I'm always willing to put them on. We had a bit of a crash there, so we'll just call this a commercial break.
Was that you or me?
I think that was me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was me. So, all right, you're listening to One Dish, One Mic. What editing? Who edited anything out? Everything is good to go here. All right, let me grab. I don't know if you have Sean Longboat's statement handy in front of you.
I do not.
And the statement from the OFIFC. Okay, I'll run through the highlights of it here. The OFIFC is strongly criticizing the federal government's 25-26 budget for cutting or failing to renew the UPIP program. And I'm going to jump right to a quote from Sean Longboat, and credit to him for putting this right in the presser itself. Sean Longboat said, "The Liberal government is breaking its promise to Indigenous people by cutting the urban programming for Indigenous Peoples Fund, which provides the critical foundation for friendship centers in Ontario to support priorities such as food, security, housing, healthcare, justice programs, mental health care, and more." That's right from the director. And so I wonder again if maybe people don't understand, and listeners might even be like, listen, you guys are against the MNO. And or not maybe not you and I, but many First Nations, such as Chiefs of Ontario, have stated that it's illogical for somebody whose Métis Nation is in Saskatchewan to be a Métis Nation of Ontario member because their home community is back in Saskatchewan, and so they should get services from there. Friendship centers are a little bit different, though, because they serve Métis, Inuit, First Nations people, regardless of their community, and they're based out of urban settings, but they aren't political organizations in the same way that a First Nation, like the Métis Nation of Ontario, is a political organization, whereas in the Friendship Centers are a service delivery organization. So it's a bit of a different model that I think allows us to sort of split hairs and sort of justify the funding here. Minister Galmasti says that it's not that these programs are ending, but it's that there's an opportunity to renegotiate for what new funding could look like. However, there's no new funding.
Yeah. So, and where's the renegotiation process then? How does that happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, what I was talking about earlier is when I was involved on the national level, we split hairs over this. We went to so many debates, so many meetings, but that process was happening.
Yeah.
That did not occur here at all.
Yeah.
Like, because if it did, the National Association of Friendship Centers would be the first ones to say, while we're sad to see this happen, we put our hopes in the fact that we are currently engaged in a process to talk about further enhancements or talk about a new vision of what this program could be. They didn't release a statement like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're ending the program, and guess what? We promise we'll get you next budget.
Yeah, it's really, again, we're talking about like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that are poured into the Friendship Center movement, and relative to other investments, I think that there's a good value for money. I think that it makes sense on a lot of levels for it to do for these investments to be made. And that's the key, is that I think that these are investments. When you look at the positive social change that's happened in our community, it's happened because we have these movements like friendship centers. It's happened because our people are going to school. I'm sorry, but there just is something about, I don't mind sharing that I participated in a panel with Niagara Health in regards to a health situation that I had. And I have no love loss for Niagara Health. I have no love loss for any sort of mainstream institution, any of the big 5 legacy areas that are mentioned in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission: healthcare, education, child welfare, criminal justice, including policing, and language and culture. So I have no love loss for any of them. But when they have traditional people that walked in, and when they brought in an Indigenous nurse who had been an Indigenous nurse, a First Nations nurse, actually, she was from Mississaugas of the Credit, very specifically, when that nurse from Mississaugas of the Credit walked in and said, I'm a career nurse, but also I'm a First Nations person, I'm like, okay, like I exhaled immediately. And I said, okay, like I understand that we've now made up a lot of ground without me having to tell you a lot of the reasons why I have misgivings around this system. Yep. And she was able to assure me that I understand where you're coming from. These are the types of things that get lost when you cut out these sort of capacity building that friendship centers and education and all these other things offer. And I don't know if people see that. Is that on people? I feel like people got to write Biddle. Like, if you're listening to this program, this is your chance to write Biddle and to say, what the heck are you guys doing with Friendship Center funding on a broad level? They should be writing their local member of parliament and saying that this is low-hanging fruit, at least the Friendship Center stuff, but then also the education stuff, but then also the healthcare stuff. Like, to me, again, I really don't understand why people aren't a little more. I mean, I understand why people are not taking into the weeds on policy, but I'm not sure. What do you think the message could be? If someone out there is listening and saying, okay, Sean and Karl, I get it. I'll contact my local leadership, or we'll talk about this at our church group, or we will talk about this at the next water cooler talk we have at our office, or whatever it's going to be. How should non-Indigenous people be framing these conversations to raise awareness in a good way?
Well, I mean, I think it's just the point of views that we approach these problems from, and I guess probably a lot to do with how we frame and how journalists and pundits frame it, is we have to look at this as community and community building, right? So think of your community. Like, if you're listening to this, identify what community you're from. If it's a Greek community, if it's a church community, if it's a community care community, right? Imagine that community being dramatically affected by these types of funding cuts. That's what's happening to us. In our Indigenous community, the success of our people is purely and solely based on the success of our community. And when you take away core funding like this, like UPIP, at an urban Indigenous level, our communities are destined to fail. I'm sorry. It's really that simple. We have yet to reconcile the effects of the intergenerational effects of residential schools. We still have yet to fully adapt into Western society. Not that we even should have to adapt into Western society. We've yet to learn to live within those markers of success. So that's how I would encourage you to do this, is understanding our perspective, what community you're a part of, and imagine that funding being taken away. It's really, really that simple, right? I mean, you look back when we talk about investments too, this is where conservatives, I don't understand conservative logic and voter logic. It's, what have you done for me now? We can be critical of the Bob Ray era, but the last major investment into housing was under Bob Ray. When we see the apartment buildings that exist in St. Catharines, that's Bob Ray. When we see the mass co-ops and rent subsidies that went into place, all Bob Ray. And that has effectively saved the last 40 years of our society. When was the last time we've seen an apartment building go up? Right? That isn't a condo. I want to be clear. That isn't specifically a condo. When was the last a co-op that was ever built? Right? We need to stop looking at these as expenses and understand that these are investments into the future. They're investments into Canada. Housing should be a human right. Housing is a human right. And we should be effectively and appropriately funding these budget items, but we don't because of the imaginary debt that's made up. Too. That's the other thing. Is like this, we need to balance the budget. We need to balance the books. For what? Right? Do you know the basis of our economic system is taking on debt? Like, that's... But anyways.
It is. I mean, it's Keynesian economics.
Yeah.
You're laying off however many tens of thousands of public sector employees while the country is headed likely for a recession if Canada's not already in a recession
Yeah.
right now. And I'm borrowing this talking point from Archie Man. So, but I mean, other critics have pointed this out that like it is basic economics that in actuality what the government could do right now is actually move the economy forward. I think that's where it hits the hardest for me is that one of the great honors of my life is that during the time of COVID-19, we didn't know what was happening with public health. And I had worked for the Fort United Friendship Center when COVID started, and we really prided ourselves on delivering services. And then I went over and I had the honor of serving as the executive director of the Niagara Regional Native Center also during COVID time. And credit to every single Indigenous person that I worked with on that staff and on that team. We all wanted to be delivering services. Nobody wanted to go home. 100% of us said that we got into a helping field and we want to help. And I believe that a lot of that is because of the culture that we had created on our own in friendship centers. We had created something on our own. We had worked with public health here in Niagara to help make sure that our communities, again, who many of whom are distrusting still to this day of COVID-19 and the vaccination process. But for our people, we had said that we will get our elders in here. We will get our leaders in here. We will get our children in here. We'll get our sick people in here, our vulnerable people. We'd also, because we've been doing this work for generations, we had lists of people that we said, okay, these are the people that are going to need the help first. These are the people that are most vulnerable right now. And we stepped up at great personal risk to, especially like I was an administrator when I was at NRNC. But all of the staff, they're frontline staff. They're the ones that are delivering the food cards. They're the ones that are standing there with the people in the lines. They're the ones that are taking all of the chances and all the risks. And the reward that we got for that is when we don't need you anymore, then we'll talk about maybe funding you. Let's have that conversation on March 30th about what we're going to do for your April 1st funding. Let's hit a pause, and then we got one more segment coming up on the other side of this break. You're checking out One Dish, One Mic right here. Thanks for hanging with us. This must be so weird to watch on video. If you're like watching us on video and they're like, he didn't go. Nothing happened. He said they were going away and nothing happened. Yet here they are. All right. I don't know. We're in the last segment. Is there anything that in terms of our budget analysis that you think we haven't hit on, Sean, or you think that our listeners should be aware of?
I mean, I think we pretty much covered it all. It's a very, very standard and typical budget. I mean, I think the framework that people should be approaching this is the National Calls to Truth and Reconciliation. Where are we on that, right? If the calls to truth and reconciliation are the roadmap, this budget is a gas to get us there. And what this dramatically demonstrates is that we are not going to become any closer. Canadian society is not going to get any closer to honoring or meeting those calls to action based on this type of input from the government or lack thereof input, right? So ask yourself, what kind of society do you want to live in? Do you want to live in one that continuously focuses on the individual? Do you want to live in one that focuses on the community, the betterment for all people? And unfortunately, here we are.
I wish I would have asked you that question with 90 seconds left because it's like a perfect finishing thought, but we still have 8 minutes to get through. I do have a couple have a couple more burning questions over the last couple minutes, and okay. They're along the lines of first off, again, I want to encourage everyone to check out the Indigenous Journalism Foundation and the work. If you haven't seen the interview that I did with Patty Sontag and with Amanda Leader, who is an amazing emerging journalist and researcher, it just sounded great on radio and had a real authentic perspective. The way that those programs are putting, what was it, like 60% of the billions of dollars that are supposed to be allocated for Indigenous businesses. This is the same group last year that uncovered that there was no vetting process to see who was or wasn't Indigenous. And so just they broke it in an investigation last year. And then in this year, they're like, okay, well, now there's a process to see who is and isn't Indigenous, but 60% of these dollars are going to Ottawa. And of that represents almost all of the Ontario investment. So you've got Western Canada, you've got the rest of the province of Ontario. You've got all these areas that critically need this investment. And again, there's no oversight on this program. The federal government, that's perhaps like if I were telling listeners to write a letter to Chris Biddle, in addition to all the other things I've been talking about for the last like 40 minutes, I would say the other thing is like like talk to Indigenous people. I know when I was ED of the Niagara Regional Native Center, I had basically no relationship with Chris Pittle's office. And it reminds me of the St. Catharines mayor and the fact that strategically, for whatever reason, he's decided that he didn't want to form that relationship with the friendship centers, and he's just going to kind of do whatever he wants. He's going to say when it comes to, houselessness, it's like an everybody issue that affects everything, and it affects everybody equally. And it just, to me, now is not the time. With us growing as a population, with Indigenous people representing a statistically larger segment of the population, but also with us being a required part of, like, there are problems to fix in Canada. There are healthcare problems. There are social service issues. There are all kinds of things that are not just Indigenous specific. I think the entire incarceration system, from arrest right up to the end of someone's probation, if they can ever get out of that system, I think the entire thing is broken. And I think you need the innovative approaches that Indigenous people have. Not to even mention, we haven't even touched on the environment and the environmental damage that would be wreaked if all these pipelines get built and this extraction economy goes on and on and on forever. And for all the people listening to this, again, unless you're fortunate to be one of the haves right now, there are certain types of people, I believe, that are benefiting from this budget. And then there's the rest of us that all we can do is rant about it on our radio shows, or maybe text into our two favorite radio hosts to talk about it. And that's like the only tool we have, because I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. My question for you, though, Sean Vanderklis, as a person that follows politics, is there's only two things that can happen with this federal budget. The other parties suck it up. Somebody's going to vote for Elizabeth May. Somebody's going to vote for it. The 7 NDPers, like Lori Idlu, I love her comment. Like, they're getting an Arctic university and they're investing $1 billion in the Arctic. The Inuit leadership is not happy with it, because they're saying, like what about other areas? Like, why are you just investing in things that are gonna make money? But Lori Idlu put it the best, and she said, "What good is a university when her children are starving?" So, but they're putting these things forward, and there's a little something for everyone. The American alternative is that people don't get paid. Like, it's interesting that we're in these similar sort of circumstances. So Canada's option is to either throw out the entire government and to have another election, or you have what's happening in the United States, where nobody's getting paid to deliver any services. And I wonder if you're just sort of comparing and contrasting that what's happening on both sides of the sort of the imaginary line there. It's quite the time. Like, everyone says they live in unprecedented times. I think we're truly living in unprecedented times right now.
Every time is an unprecedented
Every time. Yesterday was unprecedented. Tomorrow's the more unprecedented.
That's the crazy part, is as the days go and as time passes, it just becomes more unprecedented.
I don't know about the unprecedentedness.
I don't know if I'm a conspiracy theory, but I firmly believe we're in the end times.
Well, why am I paying my bills then if we're in the end times? So,
exactly. Exactly. What was the question?
I don't know, just broadly. I mean, if you think that there could be any kind of a shift, there's positives. There's the $2.3 billion. They put $2.3 billion back into clean water, starting with the next fiscal year, and it is a multi-year agreement. $2.3 billion is a significant fund. They, as the federal government likes to point out, they've stopped 149 long-term boil water advisories, as you like to point out. For like every 2 they stop, they get like 1 new one that starts back up.
Yeah.
So it is this sort of expanding problem. I like the fact that they're putting money into it. Like that is putting money where their mouth is, and that is one of the largest singular new investments that are in there. And there are other areas where this money is going in for people that want to work in these industries too. Like credit to them for First Nations that want to see these things move forward and that want to invest in these things. Except that I don't know that there's an option to say no. So I know I already asked you for your traveling thought and your final thoughts. We got about 3 minutes of airtime. So if there's anything on your mind, budget related, that you wanted to get across to our listeners, now's the chance, friend.
Well, I mean, specifically to when it comes to the clean water, I mean, the way the process works is you have long-term water advisories and short-term water advisories. In order to graduate from one to the other, you have to be on a list for, I think, 100 days or something to that effect. And First Nations people find themselves opting to stay on the short-term water, the boil water advisory, to get to the long-term boil water advisory, in hopes that their water issues become fully addressed by the federal government, which in and of itself is the definition of racism. Like, water in the $2.3 billion that they're giving us isn't a gift. right? It shouldn't be this big, generous gift. It should be seen as a gift. It should be seen as a human right, a basic right, right? Like, I'm going to gift you air. You get to breathe for another day, right? Like, it's very problematic. It's a very problematic, and it's a very capitalistic way to approach what should be human rights, which are human rights for anybody outside of Indigenous identity or who holds Indigenous identity. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just more of the same, if you will. Like, I feel, in all honesty, like, people are looking for a grand comment from us. I'm kind of beat down from these budgets because it's more of the same. We don't see, there's no change at all. There's still a boiled water advisory list that exists. Clean drinking water still exists on reserve. I don't know. Can you imagine? Again, I always go back to Walkerton. If this was Walkerton, you solved that within 9 months. People went to jail. People were arrested, so on and so forth. We're what? The National Calls for Truth Reconciliation came out in 2015. We're 11 years in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like a kid could have been born, is already in what, grade 2 by now, grade 3 by now. Like, I don't know. I'm just frustrated.
The budget needs one vote to pass. Carney calls you up tomorrow and says, Sean, I need your free, prior, and informed consent to move this forward. Is there anything you think you could do to sweeten the pot a little bit that would get your vote?
Evergreen funding for friendship centers.
Okay.
That is the solution for Indigenous people. Evergreen funding for friendship centers at a rate that is comparable to our non-Indigenous partners. If Hardy says that, I will get you 10 votes. I could probably get Carney a majority if he does that.
We'll know very soon what's going to move forward, and obviously, if Canada gets plunged into an election, you're going to be hearing a lot from Sean and I. I think that May is going to be the one that does it. I don't know. This is all going on video, and people are going to be able to look at this long after the fact. So we'll see how we're doing at our prognostication. Unfortunately, when it comes to Indigenous people and budgets, this does look like a lot more of something that we've been seeing since long before you and I were even born, and that is unfortunate. It's very fortunate that you joined me. Thank you very much for making this program today, Sean.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Jace, over there for producing us, just for the radio stuff. He's not producing any of the video stuff, but he's over there producing the radio stuff. So thank you, Jace Gordon, for doing the audio stuff. If you're watching this on video, then this guy produced it right here. So thanks to me. Yeah, this guy over here. All right. Thanks for listening to the show. Nagit with Swagwag.
Love you guys.